Hello once again. Please like and subscribe, as it certainly helps the algorithm to spread the news that mainstream media won't tell you about. Incidentally, excuse me, I will comment about AI and its potential at the end of this video, because AI has been hailed as the greatest thing since the invention of the wheel. Is it? We will see. As I've said so many times before, we are being lied to in every which way you can imagine. Now I'll leave two links in the descriptions to this video under more. It's two Americans explaining the truth about what is and what has been occurring these past few months. And we have been brainwashed for years and years about the USSR and the communist state that it was, quite obviously. And that was in the past. And by the way, doesn't actually exist anymore, contrary to popular belief. The truth is that the West has now become far more totalitarian now than the USSR ever was. Here's a few little tiny facts. In the last year, there were 400 authoritarian arrests in Russia. In Britain, there were 3,500. That should send a message to everyone. And everything has been taken away from us. For instance, the last three prime ministers here in Britain were not voted for, not by us. They were voted by members of their little club that they are in. And the three prime ministers before them, including the last three, attempted to curb free speech. And we haven't had proper free speech in this country for at least 10 years. But we do have non-government organisations, and they're everywhere, ruling our lives. The likes of the nudge units that our government employs to entice us with psychological pressure, commonly known as gaslighting. And it's happening right now, all the time. Make no mistake about it. We are being manipulated, and it's far from being subtle. Now we have Ofcom, a governmental watchdog that was to be abolished by the Tories, but so far has not been. They can and they will impose very, very heavy fines for spreading misinformation. The problem is, who decides what is misinformation? People complain to Ofcom because they are offended by what someone says. And Ofcom acts accordingly by imposing heavy fines. The problem is that being offended doesn't actually make you right. And Ofcom, as far as I can see it, is telling us that we have no free speech. So just accept it, accept that fact, and shut up, or get fined £40,000 for spreading what we believe to be the truth. And this is just a modern book burning event. And the majority of people can't see it. And the latest victim of this bullying is a guy called Mark Stein, who covered some very, very uncomfortable issues on GB News, and has now been threatened by a contract change that for him is untenable. They said that he must sign a contract where any fine imposed on GB News he will have to pay personally. So he resigned under the pressure from those who wanted him silenced. And they want many, many people silenced. Moving on. We are told that our cars that we drive now will in just a few years be obsolete. And we must buy much more expensive types because we must achieve net zero carbon emissions, which is just an impossible quest in the mind of the lunatics that impose it. And our present boilers that give us central heating will become obsolete, and we must have heat pumps that cost possibly 10 times more that conventional boilers do. And they are apparently not as good as they're cracked up to be. Now, if our local councils decide to become a smokeless zone, it then will become illegal to burn logs, and fines of £300 will be imposed on those that ignore the rules every time they light a fire. Unbelievable. And we must use green energy, while the elites who fly all over the world in their private jets to gallivant around the world to attend jollies with luxurious food, while we, the plebs, eat bugs, own nothing, and will be ecstatically happy in their deluded opinion. Fuel prices have been hiked, and most certainly by design, because in 2008 the price of a barrel of oil was at an all-time high of $147 a barrel, and yet petrol prices in those days were £1.03 per litre. Today, oil prices are at £85 a barrel, but the average petrol prices are at £1.50 to £1.60 per litre. Could you tell me why that is, Mr. Taxman? Excuse me. Certain foods have become unavailable or rationed. We're going to get smart cities to curb excess travel by local people. International travel is being restricted by price hiking. In the past, the very recent past, people were told, no jab, no job. And many of those people were sacked for not complying with these totalitarian orders. And the real big one was when the World Health Organization basically told us that we're not allowed to have a natural immunity and must have their version of it via a small prick. And our gullible leaders profess not to know what a woman is, in fear of upsetting a deranged minority, a group who seem to have a great deal of political clout And that should tell you a lot about our politicians and the people they are. And we are told not to show our religion by wearing a cross. I wear a cross. There's my cross. And I don't wear it because I'm religious. I wear it because I believe in Christian principles. And if you don't toe the line, people are encouraged to inform on you. And to top it all, the over 50s in Canada are being encouraged to commit suicide. And it won't be long before it's here too. And the only pill you'll swallow isn't a red or a blue one. It'll be a sugar-coated cyanide one to send you off to your maker at just the age when you're just finding out how the world works. Very convenient, isn't it? Utility bills are through the roof. And in my humble opinion, I think all domestic utilities, gas, electricity and water, should be nationalised and non-profit making. And I think that view is pretty the majority one. Well, apart from those with vested interests, of course. I just wonder how many of those shareholders are in high places. But that would be cynical, wouldn't it? Certain foods are out of many people's reach, and many pensioners have to either eat or heat because they certainly can't afford both. New laws are being passed on detention and arrest, even for protesting. Laws are being passed so we can't strike. Our free speech has almost disappeared and is virtually non-existent on social media, where sycophantic fact-checkers do their master's bidding with great enthusiasm. It seems now that the only place to speak freely is in our homes. But can we do that when we have Alexa and Google? It's already here. We've no idea who is watching or listening, in fact. And this platform is probably the most regulated among all social media. But it is privately owned and the owners set the rules. So I guess it's their prerogative. Now Twitter has a new captain, but things are much the same as they've always been. My ban is still in place for calling a BBC employee in a roundabout way a gynaecologist. And as far as I can see, as just an ordinary Joe Blogs, the West in general is in rapid decline, and we only have ourselves to blame for not paying attention in the past. And whatever people have believed in has been taken away, and we are left with an empty shell of a fragmented society that is doomed to be relegated to the dustbin of history. Especially when right now we can no longer even see a doctor, let alone get a diagnosis for an illness. The hospitals can't cope because the whole system is totally broken. And most certainly by design. And all of those who have believed in the American dream that has been forced upon us here will find themselves in a Hollywood nightmare blockbuster you could never ever have imagined. And all this has been brought about by weak men and women in charge who have no idea or imagination, and they most certainly have no common sense. Common sense. Was it so common after all? Was it? And in fact now it's become a rarity. If I could create a symbol of today's world, I can visualise Martin Luther King, Mahatma Gandhi and Jesus kneeling in prayer with their head in their hands, despairing of humanity, and Lucifer in the background rubbing his hands together with a huge grin on his face. And just before I go, I'd like to reveal another massive lie that has been exposed by the way of silence. It's the non-information of preventive medicines. And not just medicines, but more vitamins, especially something like vitamin D. It's very, very cheap, but essentially it's a lifesaver. 94% of those who died of colds, flu and pneumonia were found to have very low levels of vitamin D. And yet our government and media outlets failed to tell the public about this. I wonder why that is, when Big Pharma and Big Tech are so financially involved in the production of wonder drugs and spurious claims of their efficacy, which, by the way, are now being questioned and even refuted. And by the way, did you know that vitamin D is very important in the manufacture of insulin and therefore can be vital to offsetting sugar diabetes? Why isn't that common knowledge? Why weren't we told that? Why doesn't mainstream media spread that story when one person dies every seconds in the world from diabetes? Look it up. Look on Google, while you still can. Being a lifelong cynic, I tend to believe that vitamin D just didn't cut the mustard when it came to making money and lining people's pockets. I'll leave a link to a discussion by a well-known doctor regarding vitamin D. He's a doctor that has my total respect for the truth, especially now that he's been red-pilled by what he's witnessed in the last year. A humble man. Just remember this. Every breath you take gets you closer to the grave, but every breath you take can get you closer to liberation by seeking the truth that is definitely there if you want to look for it. But most people don't seem to want to bother. They're just happy to go along with the flow. But there is a massive influence clouding our judgment. And that influence could be artificial intelligence. It's an all-pervading domination and interference of reality as we've come to understand it. AI is absolutely capable of anything you can imagine. And far from being a great help to humanity, it is possibly the most dangerous tool in the programmer's box of tricks. And since AI, artificial intelligence, being what it is built by humans. And of course it can have built-in bias by those who intentionally or inadvertently introduce them into the algorithm. And those with the most bucks have the most influence in this very corrupt world we seem to be living in. The question is, who has the most influence? Because money always talks the loudest. From the 30 pieces of silver Judas collected for his betrayal of Jesus, to the lining of the pockets of major institutions by the very wealthy in exactly the same process. Bribery on an unprecedented scale. And make no mistake about it, you, the public, are betrayed by this corruption, disguised as philanthropy. How did we get where we are today? The love of money. Money, granted, has always ruled the world. But the love of money is the root of all evil, and it sure does show its malevolence in this wicked, wicked world we live in today. I don't know who said this, but the words are very true. Once, men turned their thinking over to machines in the hope that this would set them free. Sadly, it only allowed other men in similar machines to enslave them. Conclusion. We are all in the hands of AI, and that is a very, very scary scenario indeed, because AI isn't artificial at all. It is the hands of human bias, and that can be very misleading indeed, especially when money is to be made. Thank you for listening to my monologue. Bye-bye.